Hi, Jack. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my honor for Newland USA and our audience here in Vietnam to learn directly from someone who has served in the U.S. Department of State consular officer over 9 years and more than 60,000 visa interviews across 17 countries. Before we dive in, could you please briefly share what it was like as a consular officer and conducting such a huge interview worldwide?
Sure, it was a great job. I got to see the whole world. I worked on many different continents, like you said, in 16 different countries, 17 different consulates. Uh, every day, a visa officer has to do about 120 interviews just before lunch. So it's very fast paced. But it's kind of interesting because, every human being is different and has a unique story. And so you're just hearing people's stories all day long. So it's an interesting job. Of course, probably the most difficult thing is that a lot of times you have to refuse people their visas, which can have kind of a psychological toll on you, but it's something you get used to.
Great. It's a very interesting job, right? So, talking about psychological trap, with 10,000 of interview conducted, could you please share a perspective that might surprise many people? Is a visa interview just a Q&A session or it's much more complex psychological test?
Yeah, it's both. What's interesting is because we do thousands and thousands of these, after a while, we just start to see patterns. And so
Mm,
it's almost like most of your brain shuts down and you're just evaluating, does this person fit the normal pattern of what I've seen many thousands of times? And
mm.
if it doesn't fit that pattern, then it feels like, oh, there must be something I'm missing here, or they're lying about something because it doesn't fit that normal pattern of people. Beyond that, we're also evaluating your body language for sure because we've seen so many applicants. We know what a good applicant kind of looks like, how they behave, how their eyes look, how their face looks, and we start to learn about the people who are hiding things, what that looks like on your face. And if you have enough experience, you can start to see that pretty well on people. So it's both. Yeah.
Okay, and from your perspective, it's a very common question in Vietnam. People, I know that you know it's better than us. Why consular officers sometimes seem so cold and something rude?
Yeah, I agree with that evaluation. I would say there's three main reasons. Number one, like I said, we're in a hurry. We have to do 120 interviews before lunch. That means we can only spend 2 or 3 minutes on each interview. And so we're trying to be very quick. So if you're not telling us something interesting, we have to interrupt you. The
Yeah.
second thing is that, maybe the first few times you're very nice to people and then you have to refuse their visa. And if you've been nice to them during the interview, it's much harder to refuse them at the end. So we start to just kind of become very cold and robotic so that we don't get your hopes up. Because if we're very nice to you, then you think, oh, this is going really well. And then we refuse you at the end. We don't want that to happen. And
Mhm.
then the last reason I think that visa officers are rude is because there are certain kind of behaviors that applicants have. It's not their
Mhm.
fault. I mean, they've never done a visa interview before, understandably, but because we see it over and over, it starts to drive us crazy. So I'll give you one example. Like if we say to you, oh, so what do you do for your job? And they say, oh, I work. And then you say, oh, okay, what kind of work? Oh, I have a company. Okay, what kind of company? Oh, it's shoes. Oh, is it a shoe store? No, no, I
Mhm.
just distribute shoes. Like we don't want to have to ask 4 questions to understand your job. So it's so much better if we say, oh, what do you do? And you say, yes, I own a shoe distribution company. I have 13 employees. I make this amount of dollars per month. If you tell them the whole story, they're going to like you a lot more because they need information to make a decision.
Yeah, I know how it feels. It's just a endless loop, repeat every day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And could you please present a common real life situation and how to handle it to help our audience visualize better?
So regarding this mistakes, yeah. So for example, like let's talk about a combination of the DS-160 visa application, using it, and talking about money. So many people on their application, they don't list their salary. And when a visa officer sees, that you own again, a shoe store, they don't know if you're on the street with a cart selling one shoe at a time, to people door to door, or if you have 17 factories that are making millions of dollars. So inside that DS-160 application, you could put exactly how much money you make, the nature of your business, and then the officer knows the whole story without you even having to open your mouth or say a single word.
So now, Jack, let's turn into the session I think our audience found most valuable: immigrant visa, especially in employment-based category in EB3 and EB5. They are life-changing visa, and yet interviews are often misunderstood. From your perspective, what makes immigrant visa interview different from non-immigrant one?
They are completely different in the eyes of a visa officer. In fact, in our office, they're totally separate sections and we really rarely mix. There are people who do immigrant visas and there are people who do non-immigrant visas. And the reason for this is with a non-immigrant visa, like a tourist visa or a student visa, the visa officer has 100% of the power. If they don't like you for any reason, if they have any doubt, they can refuse your visa immediately using, that famous refusal code 214B. It's so easy. They can do it for anybody. That's non-immigrant visas. An immigrant visa is very different because it's based on a petition, right? And so if your petition is approved, it means the US government has already looked at all of the evidence you provided in your documents and said, yes, we think you qualify for this visa. So when you come to the visa officer is really only checking whether they think the information in your petition and your labor certification is true or not. So they ask you a few questions just to see if you kind of know that information. And as long as everything seems okay, in a 5-minute interview, they have to approve the visa, even if they don't like you, because they can't refuse you under Section 214B. It's not possible for immigrant visas. They have to find some other refusal code for you, such as not having a valid labor certificate, having a prior, visa overstay for being in the United States illegally for a long time, having committed some serious crime. These are the only kinds of reasons a visa officer can refuse your visa.
For EB3 applicants, what are the typical questions consular officers usually ask?
EB3?
Yeah, EB3.
Yeah. So for an EB3 visa, it depends, the category that you're in. They're mostly looking at your professional and academic background and whether you truly meet the requirements of the kind of EB3 visa you have. So, for example, if you're a professional, they want to make sure you have a bachelor's degree and that you're in a profession. If you're a skilled worker, they want to make sure you actually have the 2 years of experience that is required for that. If you're an unskilled worker, there isn't a lot to verify. You don't really need to have any kind of educational or professional achievements.
And what are common red flags that might raise concern in EB3 interview, and how can applicant avoid them?
Well, one would be not having any idea about what the position is. If they say to you, oh, what is your job going to be? And you say, oh, I'm not sure, it has something to do with seafood, but that's not enough. You need to have an idea of what you're going to be doing. Another red flag would be if you don't speak English. That's not necessarily a problem, but our regulations tell us, for example, if it seems that English would be reliant on the US government, for financial benefits because you are unable to earn a living on your own, then they should deny your visa for being a public charge under Section 4. Then the last thing would be if you are, self-petitioning, meaning you opened your own company in the United States that has hired you yourself to go. In some circumstances, that would not be allowed. So it could be a red flag that they would ask more questions about.
If the applicant asks, why do you want to work in the US under this job offer, what would make the strong answer and what they should avoid saying?
I think it's okay to be honest in most circumstances. You could say, I want my children to be able to go to schools in the United States. You could say, I'll make just as much money as at the fast food restaurant as I do as a doctor in Vietnam. So for me, it makes financial sense. You could say, I prefer culture in the United States and the quality of life there. I would prefer to live in an American neighborhood because it seems like a nice place to live. All of these are okay because this is an immigrant visa. It's okay for you to intend to immigrate.
You have shared some incredible insight already, but if you could give the applicant just three golden rules that apply any US visa interview, what would they be?
I'd say 1, be able to talk about money. 2, Golden rule, talk more, listen very carefully to the question they ask you, and answer that question immediately. If you don't answer the question they ask, they get very annoyed. But after you've answered the question they ask, then you can feel free to talk for another, 3 or 5 seconds, giving additional information that could be helpful for you.
Thanks again for your opening and sharing such insider knowledge. And this kind of perspective simply not finding anywhere in Vietnam. And I know our audience will truly benefit from it. And before we close, just a final advice. If you live here in Vietnamese applicant who are preparing for the upcoming visa interview, what is it? The final advice.
I would say you focus, if it's a tourist visa, on your purpose of travel. If you've never traveled anywhere before and this is your first trip, it's going to look weird. So you need a good reason to visit the United States. So it's usually not a good idea to apply for a US visa just because you want the US visa. You should usually have a good reason to travel there. So for example, like I said before, if it's normal in Vietnam to always take trips with a family member or a friend, and you're traveling alone to Los Angeles, the officer's going to think that's specific. So focus on your purpose of travel. If you're a student, focus on your university selection. It's okay to use an agent to prepare your application for you, no problem. But don't let them do all the work of picking the schools, telling you which school you should go to, filling out your application, writing your essays for you. If you let them do everything and you have no decision making in the process, then when you go to the interview and the officer says, "Oh, hi, why did you choose San Diego State University?" You don't know, right? Because the agent told you to do it. So you should be a participant in the preparation for that. And then third, for people who are applying for their immigrant visas, my final advice would be know everything that's in your petition. Again, it's so boring. I'm sorry you have to read your immigrant visa petition, but you have to know the information that's in there because they could ask you about it. And if they notice discrepancies between what is written there and what you say, that's the number one red flag for them.